Welcome to the Narrative Justice See Us podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Shannon Hughes, or Shannon Williams Hughes. I'm not sure who I want to be today, but it's going to be one of those two people. Today, I'm super excited. We're going to have a pretty interesting episode. We have several folks from our local Pittsburgh area who are going to speak on local Pittsburgh Black history. This is super important because we all kind of noticed how little we actually know about our own history. And it's really, really like rich and interesting. So this will be a really good episode. Before we get into that, I have a few things I want to note. First off, we have an update, a good update today. Our last episode, a couple of episodes, we've mentioned Ms. Janiyah Dawson. She was missing, 15-year-old young lady who went missing. Turns out that her and a friend, Zamaya, were running. Were refusing to return home. There was like some reasons, that are unknown to me of why they were away, but they did come home. They're both safe and healthy, both receiving support at this time. Thank you all for sharing Miss Josie Dennison, Janiyah's mother, her post. Thank you for pouring in, for reaching out to and being supportive of these young women. Keeping in mind, these are children. And so it's very important that we treated them as children, both Janiyah and Zamaya. So they are home, they are safe, receiving support. If you do have it in you to continue to pour support into these young women and their families, please do so. We definitely appreciate it. As a reminder, this podcast was started in memory of, in honor of Leroy Powell. Leroy was 15 years old in 2014. He was a witness to an attempted murder turned infanticide. And he did what we call the right thing, right? Like he spoke up about it. But what our local news did was they recorded his witness statement. It was played, of course, in the preliminary hearing. And they recorded his witness statement and posted it on the 11 o'clock news the following day or that night, I believe. And so what happened was Leroy received death threats immediately. And then several days later, his life was gone. And that was definitely and directly because of our local media not caring about his young Black life. And so the CS podcast, The Narrative Justice, has been and continues to be in honor of Leroy and in honor of all of the Leroys, right? Our media not taking our lives seriously, commodifying our bodies and our experiences and our narrative. It is time for us to take our narratives back. So this is to Leroy and his family. His mother's such a strong woman and continues to be hopeful wherever she is, that she is continuing to share that light and that strength. One other thing that I want to note before we bring on our guests, it only takes about 25% of community for change to occur. This was a study that was done. So if we're talking about the city of Pittsburgh is about 310,000 people, give or take, typically. It only takes about 25% of that population for us to have change here, right? So when we think about change being like this huge mountainous thing that, it can't happen, it's too big, it's really not. It feels big, but like the things aren't that big, right? Like, so if we take the things down to bite sizes, right? Take our issues down to bite sizes. And if we pour into our interests and our intentions into 25% of our population, we can have change. We can definitely have change. So I just want to make sure that we remember that as we continue to fight for justice, fight for accountability, fight for change and improvement in our city. We do have major elections coming up. The judicial election is super, super important, as is the mayoral election. All of the elections are always important, but these ones are crucial, right? They're crucial. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Look into the slate of 8, the judicial candidates. +1, I believe, is now the slate of 8 +1. I'm not totally sure on that, but look into it and see what they're talking about. So that's enough of me running my mouth, because now I'm tired. I want to bring up our first guest, Mr. Bill Gandy. How are you, Bill?
Can you hear me? Do I gotta unmute myself?
Nah, you good.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. You kids and this new technology stuff. So anyway, I guess since I'm first, I'm going to deliver some history.
Wait,
I'm
Bill,
known okay.
before you get into it, I just want to know, I know, but I want people to know who you are, where you from, and what has gotten you interested in history. And also, what are some of the things that you've done? Because I know that you had that really dope gallery on the north side, but I want to make sure everybody knows.
Well, I've done a lot of things, but I'm Bill Gandy, and I run the Allegheny City Historic Gallery. I was actually gentrified out the neighborhood, if you must know. So anyway, a couple other businesses were also during the time that I was down in East Ohio Street. But anyway, I'm from Northview Heights, and well, yeah, Northview Heights raised. So I was interested into history because I love, first of all, my city, my neighborhood. And then I started, learning more about myself, my blackness, things like that. I have an interest in all people's history, though, where everybody come from. I mean, to tell you the truth, everybody came from Africa. Everybody at some start. It's just that some people stop at one point. You know what I'm saying? Like you got these people who say, "Oh, I'm Italians, oh, I'm Greeks, I'm this and that and the other." They started in Africa. They changed due to atmospheric adaptation. You know what I'm saying? Atmospheric adaptation is what causes your skin to change. So these people started off black when they ventured out of Africa, probably about 150,000 years ago. And then they started venturing into different parts of the world. Even the Asians came this way. So black is the original color. Africa is the original spot where everybody really should subscribe to, even though they say, I'm Italian, I'm this and that, but you go further back in your history, we're all African. So, that's one of the things. And another thing is that I just love my neighborhood, and I love to hear new things that I didn't know about history. I'm really intrigued by historic things. And so in my historic gallery, we had all types of people come in. It was mostly North Side based because I'm a North Sider. So I'm mostly interested in North Side history, which was called Allegheny City before 1906. It was its own city, and then Pittsburgh annexed it. South Side was its own city too. It was called Birmingham. That's why you got the Birmingham Bridge that exists. And then you also have Manchester, which was a borough. It wasn't really connected to the North Side or anything like that. It was its own borough. So, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Oh no, I was just listening because I knew the north side was Allegheny City. I didn't know the south side was its own city as well. But that's dope. Like that's why it's super important for us to know these things, like how we kind of converge. Like that's it was mind blowing to me to learn that Allegheny City was Allegheny City. But the north side is the best side. But
there was a lot of black entrepreneurs in Allegheny. They were a lot more open to it. And I'm gonna say this because I started off, I guess, with the trail of the Underground Railroad, because there was this house in Manchester that has me really interested, and I'm gonna come back to it.
Wait, yes, Bill. Oh my goodness, I love talking to you. Every time we get together, it's like boom. I definitely appreciate that. So I want to bring the other folks up here too before we get into the meat and the potatoes of things. But we heard Bill say that he started to learn himself and got interested in learning our history, and it's so rich. Has a whole gallery, got gentrified out of the north side, as we know it has happened to several folks. Shout out to Claudie Pierre as well. It's a sad thing that we are losing our space and our history, right? Like in this way. But I want to bring up next Miss Celeste Taylor. Hi, Miss Celeste. How are you?
Good evening, everyone. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time out today, Miss Celeste. Can you tell us where you're from and what has you interested in holding our history?
I'm sure. I'm one of those people that started off in the Hill and ended up in Homewood. That's not a unusual progression for many Black people in Pittsburgh. There's some neighborhoods in between, but I mainly claim the Hill in Homewood. I was born in 1956. I got a 65th birthday coming up here. But why did I get into history? I think a lot of people my age remember Roots and how important that was. But even before then, I had a sense that I was living through history because in 1968, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered, I was living on Bedford Avenue, 1711, the same block that August Wilson grew up in. And I saw the fires and the smoke, and my mom was working as a nurse's aide at Western Psych at the time. And I asked her, I asked her so many questions. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in history, because I have a lot of questions. And she explained to me, of course, more about Dr. King. I knew who he was, and we were so traumatized and just so angry. But I wondered why my neighbors, were burning down our own neighborhood. And she said, well, Celeste, it's not like they're going to get on a bus and go burn someone else's neighborhood down, because a lot of times when people are angry and upset, they lash out at the closest things that are to them. And that's something I've had to think about, up until, today. But a lot of my history in terms of people I've met, how I've studied, and how I've utilized it in my civil rights work, and also in my just basic overall living, just has come through relationships with books. And I'll talk more about being at CCAC, being at Pitt, all those things at different points in my life. Oh, and of course, who can forget Westinghouse? I'll talk a little bit more about Westinghouse because many people know about the Wall of Fame. And I think it's a really good illustration of how a high school can be such an important part of a community. I think by honoring our history, it remains so relevant, and I hope is an example for many people to know how important it is for us to honor our history.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Definitely important. I can't wait to dig into that. I can't wait to dig into all of that. And the next person that we're going to bring up, and before we bring up our last and final guest today, I want to encourage anyone who has questions, comments, want to add to the conversation, please do comment and be a part of the conversation. These are our folks and it's our history. It is super, it's valuable and it's powerful to know our history, right? Like, because if we don't know where we come from, we definitely don't know where we're going. And so much of our current is repetitious of our past. So just want to point that out there. If you have any comments, questions, or anything you'd like to add to the conversation, feel free to comment on the live here. And so the last person we're going to bring up for today is Miss Renee Wilson. Hey, Miss Renee.
Hi. How y'all doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you for having me. Hi, Celeste. Hi, Bill.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Miss Renee. Can you tell us where you're from and why you're interested in holding and sharing our history?
Okay. Yes. My family is originally from the Hill. If you want to say that. They're from the Hill, but they were pushed out of the Hill. And when I was born in Homewood, up on Perchman Street. And I remember just being a little girl in Homewood. I lived on Perchman Street, but later, when I was about 5 or 6, I lived on Blackador, which is not that far from Perchman. It's right down the hill. But I remember a community on that street. Like everybody knew everyone. Everyone looked out for everyone. and everyone took care of the children. It was so good that when I was in kindergarten, I went to Crescent Elementary School. And back then, they didn't have kindergarten all day. They had it a half a day, where you would go in a half a day, either in the morning or the afternoon. And I would go in the afternoon. So my older sister, she would already be in school, but I would have to walk myself to school, and it was very safe for me to go from 1078 Blackador Street to Crescent Elementary, because there was people watching me all the way, the community. And I'm so happy about that, because I know that gave me a foundation, you know, and to understand community. And it made me feel the safest that I've ever felt in my life, you know, being in a place that people looked after each other like they were family. And even right now, still on Blackador Street in Homewood, there's still a lot of that there on that street, because most of those houses were brought and kept by those families, the families that was pushed out of the hill when they took their property. And so that makes me want to make sure that I know the history, because sometimes what happens is our history get tied up or twisted when we're not writing it or expressing it or continuing our oral tradition of passing it down. You know what I mean? It gets lost or forgotten, you know? So I think it's important that we keep it, and we keep it, we you know, make sure that it is our story, not someone else's story that someone else is telling and leaving out very important parts of us. So I think it's very important that it is our history, and that we pass it down. You know, sometimes I think that because of the society that we live in, that sometimes we think what we believe in our history is not as important as the other people that's telling it. And you see, I use the word we, because if we don't think it's important, you know what I mean, then it's diminished. You know what I mean? We have a very rich history, and some of it is forgotten because as time goes on, we forget parts because it's not passed down, or people don't think that it's worth saving. So we just have to get better at that, because it's really rich. So I'm very interested in that, and the overall safety of the community. I was looking at the they called it the Racial Integrity Act of 1925, I think. And in it, I was surprised because it was put in the instead of a law, it was a part of a health. How can I put this? It was like the health department that thought that it was important to have that law. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow. So they thought that it was important, for health reasons, to have a law to separate races. Isn't that something? They thought it was for their health. And I think it's like, you know, things like that, when you don't get the full, you know, teaching of what was going on at the time and everything like that, and you wonder why we're here now. You know what I mean? It's like it's funny, and then people try to separate a part of you. Like, if most of us look at in our heritage, you will find out that there's a lot of Native in us. Now, wonder why they would want to take that part away from us. That we are not only from Africa, you know what I mean, in a part of the wonderful people that came from Africa, but we are also the people, the indigenous people of this land right here that we live on. Why was it so important to make us think that we're not them? So we can feel like this is not a part of us. So we can feel that we're strangers in our own land that was always our land. But we lose it. We lose all of that because we take somebody else's narrative. And that's the reason why I like these types of broadcasting that Shannon is doing. Q K Productions, because they are bringing that kind of stuff out. You know what I mean? The stuff that we need to remember and cherish. You know what I mean? Because my grandmother used to say, everything that glitters is not gold, and everything bigger ain't it doesn't mean it's the best. So we need to just be, love what we are and who we are. That's it for me. Thank you.
Yes, Miss Renee, all of the points. Yes, absolutely. That is absolute. Yes, like that's power. And to your point, we don't even know why we do certain things today, and how things got started. So thinking about law, like how laws were implemented, the idea of segregation being a health reason, like necessary for health, like that is insane. And erasing like our indigenous heritage, our indigenous blood from us, like absolutely, like it makes us foreigners, in our own land. It breaks down our power. So definitely that. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I cannot stress that enough. So I would like to get started with Bill, if you, and very casual, because I know you all have so much to give. We don't even have enough time in the day to cover everything that you all have to offer. But I just want to ask you all, some things that some interesting facts that you all think that, the rest of us wouldn't know offhand. So Bill, I'd like to get started with you, pick your brain a bit. What's something you could tell us about Pittsburgh that we don't already know? And bonus point for Black Pittsburgh.
I know why all of their people ended up from the Hill out to Homewood. I could tell you that. It was part of, the reason why Black people ended up in Northview Heights also. You know what I'm saying? The Hill District was, it was lived in by several different types of people. First, it was the Jews. Then you had the Greeks, the Poles, and all of these. Then finally, you had the Blacks who lived there, African Americans. And they had nice business districts, music districts. Billy Eckstein, all these people played in this area. But they wanted to clear it out for the Civic Arena project. So I'm assuming that your families all had to leave somewhere between 1958 through 1962, because this is about the time that they started the Civic Arena project. And this is the same time that Northview Heights began. And Northview Heights was being built at about 1958. So they began the project. They knew about 1958 that they were going to clear out the bottom hill. Okay, so Homewood was another stop, But the reason why you guys were in that area is because it was one of the areas of the Underground Railroad, Believe it or not, Blacks always frequented that area after a certain point in history. So it was easier to hide runaway slaves in that area. You had things like the AME Church that was a good hiding place for it. The Crawford Grill was a great hiding place for slaves. And so this is why it flourished in African-American ways, and your families were both from there, believe it or not, because of some type of African roots that dealt into the Hill District. So when the Civic Arena project came out, Homewood was another good area to put Blacks, because I have these photos from Homewood. I mean, all you got to do is go to my ACHG Pittsburgh Facebook book page, and you will see these images of Black people with suits, and I don't know their names and things like this. Like somebody just brought them into me and said, "Hey, Bill, check these out." I don't know anything about them. And there's like whole congregations, not church congregation, business congregations of Black men in suits and things like that. So Homewood, it started off white, just so you know. It was a wealthy white area. And they took a lot of, since they start moving further out into the suburbs, you know what I'm saying? They took a lot of those mansions and they start making them into a lot of apartment buildings and things like that. That was part of their plan, in order to move the Blacks from the lower hill. So even my people, just so you know, who are in Northview Heights came from the Hill. You know what I'm saying? We all got family in the Hill. We all got family in the Hill. So Shannon, I bet you got family in the Hill. We all got family from the Hill or in the Hill or something such as that. You know what I'm saying? It was due to that clear out project. They cleared out about 800 acres of land. That was in about 600 businesses. You know what I'm saying? They all had to relocate somewhere. So Homewood was an attractive place. Now, Northview Heights, it started off interracial because what they were doing is, I guess it was some type of project that they were doing. They took the people from East Street Valley, because there used to be a whole bunch of houses in East Street Valley. And they were populated by white people. And then they took the people from the lower hill and they added them to Northview Heights area too. So it was a combination of East Street Valley, who was being dug out for the highway, and hill people who were dislocated. And they decided to put these people in one neighborhood to see if it would work, you know. So it worked for a long time, believe it or not, you know. And then there was this time where they call, I guess, the Great White Flight, when they started building the suburbs, you know, when white people could afford to move out or something like that. And they were blaming the insurrections that was happening in Northview on the new black people that were moving in, you know. And that's some of the things that I know about Northview Heights history for sure. So you could go back in time and look at some of these things, you know, that I'm talking about in history, but it's all real. All of these people came from the Hill.
Thank you, Bill. Shout out to Audie Chapman, a good friend of mine. His family is actually from East Street Valley, Black actually. And he shared with me his grandmother, or his great aunt, I think it was, they were gentrified out of that space for the, you know, the highway. I didn't even know that there was that whole area down there where 279 is, used to be a whole neighborhood that they, you know, leveled out. And folks, like you said, were carted off to whatever direction, typically either Northview or Homewood. Bill, would you be able to speak to, and I'm not sure if there's an answer to this, but why Homewood was the next stop, since it's all the way on the east side? And I'm trying to connect like how that was like the feeder for displaced Black and white folks on the north side. Well, actually, if we're talking about Homewood, displaced Black folks on the north.
Well, first of all, I'm trying to find out where Brushton is, because I don't know where Brushton is. They always say, "Oh, where Brushton." Where is this place called Brushton? Okay, and secondly, Homewood was already historically Black. It already had a Black community of progressive Black people that were already in that region. So they figured, you know, kind of like Northview Heights, they're moving all the new Africans in, Black with Black, you know what I'm saying? But all Black don't match, you know what I'm saying? So it's just, Homewood was an attractive area because it was already historically Black. I could tell you that from a bunch of pictures I have. But in its early history, it was really wealthy white people that lived out there. And these people probably ended up in Squirrel Hill and stuff like that.
Got you. Thank you for clarifying that. And so if we're talking about, the gentrification of the Hill District, the Lower Hill District, and displacement of Black folks thereof, Miss Renee, I'm thinking about you. Now, Miss Renee is a Wilson, and Miss Renee, if you do not know Miss Renee, you should know Miss Renee. She's August Wilson's cousin. And before you speak, if you don't mind me telling this story, Miss Renee, I told it several times on Facebook, and I'm gonna keep telling it. So August Wilson, her cousin, famous playwright from Pittsburgh, from the Hill District, got famous after he left, came back, and there's the August Wilson Center downtown in his name, in his honor. The center a couple of years ago quietly changed the name of the August Wilson Center. Now the full name was like the August Wilson Center for African American Culture, version of that. I might have jumbled it, but it was very clearly African American, etc. The center, after some restructuring, changed the name, and they took African American out of the name. Miss Renee and her then husband, Paradise Gray, shout out to Paradise, were at the center, and they happened to notice like some signage that said African, or I guess Wilson Cultural Center, and they were like, that's weird. And so they went to, the CEO or ED, whichever the structure is, the ED, and asked her, well, what's up with the name? She wasn't the nicest person to them, wasn't necessarily giving at that point, but kind of shrugged it off or whatever and kept it pushing. Now, Miss Renee and Paradise are very much Black and very much understand like the importance of a name. So they could have just let it go, but they didn't. So, they started making noise everywhere on Facebook, recruiting folks like Miss Celeste Taylor, myself, Nikki Jo Dawson, Cynthia Kenderson, and Tim Stevens. And so, Miss Renee was making all the noise. She had a petition, was again like recruiting folks, and it had its impact. And so the center weren't necessarily happy about all of it, but they did invite us out to have a conversation about what was going on. Now we went to this conversation with them. I was a little late. I showed up, and it was completely random how I showed up, but I showed up. I was late because I got the information a little late. So when I walked in the room, it was contentious. It was thick in there. Like everybody was like in their own little corners. And so I came in and I sat and I listened for a little while, and everyone was saying it was a lightweight argument, low key. Like it wasn't all that friendly at the moment. And so I let her listen to everybody speak, and then eventually I spoke up. And I reminded folks when we're talking about history, right? Like, now this is Pittsburgh history. If you look at any other burg in the country, none of them are spelled with a U-G-H. They're all spelled with a U-G. And for a period of time, that was true for Pittsburgh, PA, for a short period of time, relatively speaking. And this was like, something that the post office decided they wanted to separate themselves from Great Britain. So whatever. And so they did that. They changed all of the burgs across the country to the UG spelling, and Pittsburgh being Pittsburgh, right? Like, and this speaks to Pittsburgh history of like protesting and social justice and identity. Pittsburgh had a years-long initiative to change the name back, because Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is UGH. That's who we are, right? Like, so there was such this like tight relationship to the name and understanding of how important a name is that, they literally fought for it. I believe the University of Pittsburgh was involved. One of like our senators, like the prominent senators of the time, I believe, was involved. Like some big hitters was involved. And eventually they changed the name back. So that's why Pittsburgh is spelled with a UGH. Only Pittsburgh, PA is spelled with a UGH. Pittsburgh anywhere else is not spelled that way. Berg anywhere else is not spelled that way. That's why Wilkinsburg doesn't have an H, and so on. And so as we were, sitting there, I told this story, and I was like, this is why this is important, because the reasoning that they were saying is that because they had to do restructuring, that they had to change the name. Like, okay, that makes sense. But also it was mentioned that because white folks would feel uncomfortable or something with it being called African American, would either feel uncomfortable or unwanted, is why like the African American had to be dropped, which I just didn't appreciate that as being a thing that came out of a Black person's mouth. But it did. But eventually at the end of that conversation, so once like the conversation around like this is how Pittsburgh recognizes importance of a name and labeling and identity, the space kind of cleared out, and it was a little bit more like give and go. There was still like somebody who wasn't all that friendly, like wasn't trying to have it, but I will say that the board president and whatnot, like we're having conversation, they did settle on changing the name one more time, and now it's I believe the African American Cultural Center. So that I just wanted to note that, like, we're talking about Miss Renee Wilson, like a powerhouse in our city, like our living legend. Like, she is someone that we should know. She is Pittsburgh history, as is Miss Celeste Taylor, as is Tim Stevens, as is Nikki Jo Dawson, as is Cynthia Kenderson. So we definitely got to like hold our history. Our history is being made every day, and these are our people who are doing it. So thank you all for allowing me the space to share that. Super important. But Miss Renee, after all of that, I wanted to bring you in. If you could tell us some information like spanning from, I know you have plenty of stories with the Hill District, but I'm curious about, your genesis there.
I I would since you talked about the August Wilson Center, then I want to talk about when August Wilson was in Pittsburgh. Now, when he was in Pittsburgh, I was born in 1961. August was born like the same year as my mother, so we would not have been playing outside together as first cousins. You know, he was much older than me. He, but what I did love about what he did here, him and not only him and Rob Penny, they had a theater company called Black Horizon Theater, and in the community they would teach things like how to expressing yourself, you know what I mean, and different things in the community that the community could attend, you know what I mean, and it was open for the community. At that time, he didn't call himself a playwright; he was a poet at that time, and they was teaching the community. Now, and I want to talk to you about what some people call progress, that sometimes is not progress. So what happened, it was during the time of a great Black movement, and the universities of the colleges decided that they were going to go get this great talent that they were in the streets in the community, and offer them to come in and be able to be a part of the universities to teach them, to teach in the universities. Well, now that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But what it did is it really cut off that type of education to a lot of the people in the community who didn't have the money to be able to go to the colleges, and it started. I'm not going to say started, but it was a part of pushing the class. Where we're not just separated by race, but by class. So a lot of African Americans who could go to college put themselves in a different class than the masses that was still left in the community. And now the educators are now sitting in the universities. And what was you were able to get out in the community was not only in the universities. And it hurt our community a lot. The reason why there is a void in even education in our communities. That's it. That's what I know.
Wow. I'm thinking about like how that has an impact on our today, right? Like that changing the trajectory of how we engage with education, how we access education. Yeah, definitely interested in what has that looked like over the years. Miss Celeste, if it's okay, Miss Renee, to bounce over to Miss Celeste. All right, Miss Celeste, I am definitely interested in what you would like to add. So tell me something that I don't know about Pittsburgh Black history.
Well, I actually think that Renee and I have been creating some of it. I think it's important to talk about the role our children have played in our movement work. And I'd like to share a story about how we went to Topeka, Kansas in 2006. And it's a long bus ride, 21 hours. And I took my twin sons, who were, I think, 14 at the time. And this was on the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And we just didn't want to take a few people. We wanted to take a busload of people. So it became a project. And there's other projects that we get involved in around education, stopping police brutality. But this one is about the Topeka, Kansas trip. And when you have your children take part in something like this, where you're on a bus with them that long and you're going to something that historic, a commemoration. And we were able to meet some of the people who became lifelong friends of ours. But that rich history of being present at something like that, I think changes their life. And I think it definitely had a role in how they fought to keep Chinley High School a high school, because a few years later it would be taken away from them. But they had that experience of fighting for something that they believed in. And all my children at different points in my life have taken part in movement work. I have the unique, thing of having had children in different decades, the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. And all of them took part in movement work that I've been involved in. And I think that's an important discussion to talk about the role our children play in all of this. They're not just, props, to put up before the camera and say how cute they are. They're to be nurtured and respected, for their beliefs, and to help mold them. So education, the role of education has always played an important role in my life and in how I think about history. I can remember a group of us being on junior high quiz, and we considered ourselves hood scholars, at Westinghouse. And we knew a lot, but when we had to compete against other schools that had a lot more resources, it wasn't that we didn't have the capability. We just was never taught that. And that stuck with me. So many of the people that excelled at Westinghouse in all different kinds of fields. We're not just talking about entertainment, but that's great. But also, scientists and artists. So many of them had that pride of learning and being proud. And of course, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. That's what's on my inscription as part of the plaque, the Westinghouse Wall of Fame. So leading up to how when I went to CCAC, and Dr. Etna McKenzie was just a powerful mentor who was so instrumental in teaching so many of us about our own history, gave me the courage to invite freedom fighters from South Africa to talk about their movement, and also Professor Dennis Brutus at Pitt, who spent a lot of years here, and his just amazing, phenomenal history of working for human rights, and people like Elma Fox, who's still with us, who's almost 100, who saw me walk up and down Center Avenue registering people to vote, and would have me come up to the office in the Hill District and talk about, what she did. And Nate Smith, who lived in Homewood near me, who was a great labor leader, who would show me these binders full of magazines about how he went overseas and met different celebrities, but his work was making sure that Black people were able to be employed in Pittsburgh. So a lot of the history is integrated in our families, in our neighbors, in our elders, in our mentors, and in our education system. And I'm just hoping that whatever medium we're able to communicate to people, and especially younger people, that they feel that they can get a taste of this history and it lights a fire in them.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Celeste. I have a couple of, thought and then a question. My one thought is going in the direction of when you mentioned like the role that children and youth play in the movement. That's been coming up a lot in recent years. I know there's been a lot of upliftment of youth taking lead and young adults taking lead, the thing that I found kind of like off-putting is that that support that's needed from our elders, the wisdom that's needed from our elders, the direction, the guidance, the history that is needed from our elders that I feel like has been lacking a lot. So we do have a lot of youth who are kind of pushed to the front, you know, that I've witnessed in late years, right? They're pushed there, and they're kind of mouthpieced in some ways, right? But they're not supported. They're not loved in the way that they need to be loved, and especially like as violent as things have been taking place. And so when I think about like I was just talking to a friend yesterday about like the Black Panther movement, right? Like, and what support looked like in that time, right? Like what it looked like for the kids to be educated, to be nourished, right? To be protected. Then, and then thinking about now, and we have kids who are traumatized terribly, right? Like who are hungry, who are homeless, like, or unhoused. Like we have kids who are just out here and they're expected to perform. And that's what it is perform at social demonstrations, but they're not loved on. And they're not educated, you know, like they're not classically trained, you know, they walk into these movements, you know, and then it's like, here, like you have a good faith, like let's push you all the way out here until you break, you know, and then we just keep moving. So I'm thinking about that super heavy as you talk about that. And I'm thinking about like the history and the, you know, the revolution of revolution, right? Like how things have, you know, what it was like, and then what it is like, and where like some of the things have broken down as far as our cohesion. I'm thinking about like how gentrification has played a direct role in our inability to organize the way that we used to be able to organize. Police terrorism as being a direct reason why we can't organize the way that we've used to organize. But like those are some thoughts that are running through my mind on that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. And then I might have missed it. Forgive me if I did. I'm thinking about the trip to Topeka. Can you share what that trip was for? And if you did, I apologize. Can you share it again for me?
Oh, that's okay. It was 2006, so it would have been the 50th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision that desegregated schools. And we thought it was important enough for us to organize a bus trip, multi-generational folks to take that trip. And we participated in a protest and also participated, well, we were trying to get away from some crazy white supremacists who hated everybody, who were also protesting at that time. So that was a lesson in, you know, the need to protect children from people that are there to spout hatred and would hurt them. So protection of our children is a must. I was, you know, we've also been at stopping police brutality marches where there were people, you know, on trucks with Confederate flags. And one time Mel Blount was trying to open up a home for our children. And we were in a town and I got separated from the crowd and I had to protect my boys. And it's scary. So you know, the need to organize, you know, we have to organize for everything these days when we have protests like this. And I'm also thinking of, you know, the generation of your age, Shannon, and that whole leadership helm that you have now, and the gap sometimes between, you know, the generation even, you know, after me, you know, the, you know, 50 and 40-year-olds. So we got a lot of work to do in that regard. I could say that there are patterns, and there's times I wish I could share stories of when I went through similar things. It's not like, oh, back in the day I had to do. No, it was real. I can remember being a young woman, you know, in my late 20s and being a part of the African Heritage Classroom Committee. And they thought I was bossy, and that I was just trying to run things. I wasn't, but I was just enthusiastic, and I wanted to help so much, and it hurt my heart to have this elder like cuss me out. But we later, were okay, and we learned how to respect one another. But this happens in movements. So the more we talk about them honestly and make some commitments to one another, to treat one another with respect. And I often put up on Facebook a poster that says how we need to, be together so that we can be dangerous. If we don't, we have to be gentle with one another so that we can be dangerous together. It doesn't mean that we let people run over us and use us. But I feel a certain amount of obligation. It comes in the way of patience and experience, and knowing that my respect and love for our people, and knowing that there's going to be a change because we're working on it. So my faith, holding on to that, allows me to work through some challenges, whether it's how we're trying to make sure the children are safe on the block where our community farm is, or how I'm going to engage with all this energy and amazing work that young people are doing today. I'm just excited that we still have the opportunity to do this and make some changes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Bill, we didn't talk about this previously, but I remember you mentioning something a while ago. And if this is not a conversation that you can have or want to have, that's fine. But it just popped in my mind. I'm thinking about the community center or the family center in Northview. You had told me about the name, and still thinking about naming, right? Like, you told me about the name, what it used to be and what it is now. Can you tell us a little bit about that in specific to like what the name was and why, and then when it was changed?
Wait, which community family center are we talking about? Because you had the Harambe House, you had the Ernest T. Williams Center, you had the Vineyard. I mean, you had a whole bunch of them up there in Northview. They were all over the place.
First of all, I didn't even know that, which is a shame. And again,
but myself, as far as I have a slight opinion on the what's kind of happening to our community, because it's kind of like, well, first of all, let me take you back in history, a little further back in history, back to ancient Rome. Okay, do you know the first Romans were black? They were called the Etruscans. Okay, and I read some stories where the Etruscans, they let the albinos, that's what they called them, the albinos, live amongst them, but they kept teaming up, or grouping up, to take them down. And I think right now, we have an issue where TV's kind of changed. I know you ladies know this as sure as I speak, but when I was younger, you might have got jumped in the neighborhood, but you were coming home. You wasn't getting shot, And I've noticed a changeover in the community from the times where we used to watch. Don't get me wrong, some of the stuff was jigaboo stuff back then, you know what I'm saying? But when they start switching over to Juice and New Jack City and stuff like that, that's when I started noticing a drastic change. That's when it felt like a strong change to me, just living through it and seeing it. That's, kind of what I feel. I've seen now, Shannon, you're actually exceptional, by the way, because a lot of people don't do what you do in the capacity that you do it. You've even helped me. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know about you, but you're excellent in what you do. But I want you to understand that you're exceptional. The whole Black community is not like you. You know what I'm saying? So we will have some people that are driven like you, but we will have a lot of people who don't have the drive or has that mentality like they see on TV. Okay. The thing is how do we get more people to think like you? How do we get more people that want to help the community instead of just, just sit back and watch shows and mimic these shows? Like, you seem to be real. You don't seem like you're mimicking no TV show, And a lot of people I come across, our people, seem to mimic a lot of shows, even the way they talk with their hands and all the different stuff like that, These seem to be things that, I don't know, that seems to be holding us back. We need more people. If we're going to talk about the young people, we need people with drive. And how do we get that? That's more of the question to me.
So I want to, you didn't answer my question, by the way, but I want to answer this. I want to speak to this and then get back to that. But when it comes to our folk, right? And I mean, I'm regular degular as far as I'm concerned, but I do recognize that I have certain privileges that, my counterparts don't always have. And I want to speak specifically to that, right? Because we didn't grow up exceptionally at all. We went from, being poor to middle class to damn near abject poverty, but even in that, I always had a level of access. And I've always had a level of support, and I've always had a level of resources that my counterparts did not have, right? And it wasn't a lot, it was just little things. Even if it was I didn't get in trouble in school like everyone else did, and I didn't. I literally did not. I would watch my friends get in trouble for stuff that I did, and they would watch me do it and be like, "All right, Shan, go ahead, but you get 10 days suspension." And that's systemic, right? That's super violent, and it has an impact. My homegirl. I remember specifically, we were in our culinary arts class, and the teacher was sweet enough, but I had the feeling that she was scared of the Black kids. But she was cool, whatever. And she told us not to do something very specific, and I had it in mind that I was going to do it anyway, and so I did it anyway. And me and my friend, who was telling me not to do it, we were standing by the food we were cooking. And the teacher came over, looked at the food, saw that someone did what they weren't supposed to do, and looked directly at my homegirl and started basing on her, in her face, talking all this stuff. And my friend's like, "I didn't do it." And I was laughing at the time because I was a kid and I thought it was funny, but I didn't realize how that was absolutely colorism. My friend is really, really dark skinned, and I'm not. I literally did the thing. She didn't even think it was me. And then when I finally fessed up, was like, "All right, it was me." She just laughed it off. She was completely ready to suspend my friend who's done nothing wrong. Is not even someone who would do something wrong, but she's dark and I'm not, I'm everybody's favorite, and that was it, So understanding those things do have their impact, right? And when you're treated like that on the regular basis, of course it's going to affect you. Even we didn't have, we were not rich at all. We didn't have everything. There was days we didn't eat. There was days we didn't have electricity. There were days that we didn't have, but what I had was access. I had people who supported me on a college track. I had my principal paid for my cap and gown for graduating high school. My teachers, my guidance counselors, several of my teachers wrote recommendation letters for me to get into Pitt. I was going to Pitt, and that was all. And I got in. It was literally, I just had privilege. That's it. That's all. And so when we're talking about our folks who don't go in the same direction that I went, it's because they didn't have the access. I have neighbors, I lived in Northview too. You know what I mean? I lived on the north side, broke too. It didn't really have much to do with that. It had to do with the fact that I had resources, access, and support. No matter how little it was enough to get me through the door. And I only creeped my way through the door, right? Make no mistake, I'm sneaking in all of the doors, but it's enough for me to make it through. Versus I got friends who are wild smart, super, super intelligent, and they're in jail. Or they're still where they are, and they ain't got nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with them not having the same privileges that I had. So I just wanted to speak to that because it's very important. We have this idea of blaming our folks for things that are systemic. It is not our, we're people, right? And we're fantastic. We're amazing. We're incredible. We just are, by nature of who we are. But there are so many, from the day that we're born, everybody is beating us down. Everybody. And unfortunately, they win a lot because it's systemic. And it's over time and it's gradual. So when our folks don't have, that's the reflection of it. When we see folks stuck in a cycle, when we see folks acting out, that's what we're seeing is the outcome of what's been done to them and to us for however long. So I wanted to make sure I speak to that. But Bill, you didn't answer my question. And I ain't forget, so I'm going back to that. The center I'm talking about, and it was in passing when you told me about this, is the one, I think, is that Chicago? It's not Chicago, but it's near Chicago. but it's like in that cut to the street that used to go down the lead down the East Street, but it's cut off now, and it's like right there. Yeah, I think you had told me that it was named after a person who was from Northview at some point, and I think he was like killed by the police or something, and it was named after him. Can you speak to that? I don't know. I don't even recall the story of it because it was like literally I was leaving and you had like mentioned it, and it stuck in my mind because they changed the name. Are you able to speak to that? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about the Ernest T. Williams Center. Actually, I think, if I'm correct, he's from Manchester. You know what I'm saying? And we just happen to name it after him because it was a wrongful police shooting. You know, this wrongful police shooting stuff, this isn't new. You know what I'm saying? That's why we got a lot of societies and buildings and organizations named after these people, because they were usually treated wrongly, you know. But one more thing about the access thing. There's some things that people might have access to, but they don't expose it the same way. Like you're a different type of person, as I was saying. Because I was class president, all that stuff. I got away with a lot of stuff in school, and I'm brown, trust me. And I think a lot of times it's what you do with it. I don't know who was your mentor or anything, or if you had a mentor or something like that, or what made you decide to go into social work and helping people and things like that. But a lot of people, they do have, because I got some high yellow sisters, trust me, I got 5 sisters. They didn't have all the same access that you have. You know what I'm saying? And it's a personality thing, I think, a little bit more, that people have to be taught more to have your type of personality and then given the access or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Because I still think it takes an exceptional person to still be able to do those things, because, you know, we all wake up the same way, but we don't all do the same things and think the same way. And the things that I've seen you do, I mean, I'm keeping it real. A lot of people don't know half the stuff you do. But if they knew that you think differently, and this is what we need in our community, is people trained to think like you. You know what I'm saying? What's driven, what's driving. Now, Miss Renee, I know, you know, you're in paradise and all the love that y'all giving me to amongst the rest of the community. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people don't know. I know a lot of these people, you know, like Dicey, he hooked me up with a lot of interviews and stuff like that, you know, with celebrities and stuff like that, you know, and he's really instrumental in the Hip Hop Museum in New York. There's a lot of things that these people have going on, and they think different. This is what I'm trying to get to, is how do we get a think tank to create a newer generation of people that's going to think like this, like you, Shannon?
Word up. Well, I think this is a good start to that, right? Like, so building a foundation of knowledge and understanding of who we are and where we come from, you know, like just knowing who you are, like that's strength enough to stand up on your own 2 feet, especially when your feet have been like knocked from under you all of life, you know? So like what y'all are doing right now today, like that's strength enough to build in that drive. It's certainly a strength for me. And again, like I've always kind of had access to my little things, and it's been enough to get me to here. You know, so yeah. But you still ain't answered my question. So I ain't gonna do this no more with you, Bill. So it was the Ernest T. Williams Center, and he was from Manchester, and it was a wrongful shooting. Is there anything you could tell us more about that? You're muted, Bill. Go ahead.
Okay, anyway, that's pretty much all I know about it, being from that neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Is the things that I heard in the neighborhood from that. I didn't really research, but I actually belonged to the Ernest T. Williams Center and did a lot of things with them. You know, I was on the drill teams, and, you know, they were teaching like video media and all types of things like that. It was a really instrumental thing for the Black neighborhood. And I think we need to get more institutions like that going in the Black neighborhood.
Word up, word up.
My question to you, Shannon, is how do we get the guns out this new generation? You ready for that?
That is a longer conversation. We didn't even go down that road on today, but I feel you. But what was interesting about the Ernest T. Williams Center to me is like that's no longer what it's called. It's was the Urban League Center, Family Center, Support Center, something like that. And so like why that like stuck out to me, and this has always been the thing for me, is that they erased this person. Like I know nothing about him. Like I've never even heard that name until you mentioned it to me, right? Had no connection to what was going on until you mentioned it to me. And in fact, I had a project with our kids several years ago, and we researched police violence locally, and his name never came up, And so like this is a whole person that was erased, like a whole circumstance that was erased from our history. And I'm wondering like the like his wrongful death, right? Like how that has changed the trajectory in our city, right? Again, like history is so important. And when we don't know where we've come from, like how could we possibly know where to go? You know, like so the fact that the Urban League changed the name, like kind of like it sits with me wrong. Like I feel like that's wrong. And not to say that they did it maliciously, but it still just feels wrong to me, like, and that happens quite often, like, you know, the Pittsburgh public schools eventually changing all of the names of the schools to Pittsburgh King and Pittsburgh Alderdice and Pittsburgh whatever, you know, and yeah, like it erased Martin Luther King Elementary School, right? Like now it's Pittsburgh King. Like what is that? Like that's nothing. Martin Luther King has a whole history and it's tied to us, right? Like in our center of our Black neighborhood, right? Like, and now it's Pittsburgh King versus the Martin Luther King Elementary School. You know, you're muted, bro.
Oh, okay.
But
all right, I'm gonna dig up that Ernest Tolliver Williams story, and I'm gonna break it out. You know what I'm saying? Because I know how to dig for this stuff. You know, but I'm gonna find out exactly because I should know. I should really know. As far as me being like an ambassador of Northview and stuff like that, I should definitely know more about that situation. You know, and so I'm going to dig into it and find out. And that is pretty deep that you notice that has totally erased him from history. You know, that, you know, nobody even knows who he was anymore. The center's gone. Now it's the Urban League. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is that? They should have made a plaque or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you're on something there.
thank you, Bill. Thank you. I know you know how to do that better than I do. So when you do, please do let me know because I'm thoroughly, you know, interested. So I want to shift gears a little bit. So I learned recently about the creation of the East End Co-op. Now, if anyone who's not familiar with the co-op, it's basically a market, but it's co-owned. It's a co-op. And I was unfamiliar with like how it actually got started in the way that it is kind of shocked me a little bit. So Ms. Renee and Ms. Celeste, I know you all are very familiar. Whichever one, like, would you all mind, if you wouldn't mind speaking on that?
To know about the history of the East End Food Co-op, because one of the founders is a friend of mine. She's a Black Quaker from Kenya. And I know that her husband and maybe a few other people, but her and her husband were the main founders. And originally they had wanted it to have more of a relationship with Homewood, which isn't really happening. And the Black Urban Gardeners and Farmers of Pittsburgh Co-op and some others have been talking with them about a way that they could be more helpful, and especially to Homewood, and in light of that and that history. And I know there's still some talks, but what's happening with many of the gardens and the farms in Homewood, which are now being developed. And on the block I live is the Homewood Historical Community Farm, which I managed for a few years until I retired. a lot of this is coming about because our need to have, our own, and many of the younger people that are getting into this movement, which is really exciting, being able to grow our own food and have some land and help feed our people, which is just primary, to our existence. And in terms of building community, there's few things that are better than having. I actually need water.
Hi.
Renee can jump in.
Okay. Hi. I learned about the Eastern Co-op because they knocked on my door when they was recruiting for membership. And what they expressed to me, being a young mother and having these children, about healthier food for the children, being able to grow, buy in bulk, save money on your food. So I was definitely interested, and I became a member. That's why I knew about it. I knew about the co-op and who started it. And if this is another thing about things that disappear, like that history, well, a lot of people probably know it, but it's not talked about. You know what I mean? It's not passed on, so people don't even know that. You know what I mean? The origins of it and why that it was what happened. Sometimes we get, you know, other people co-op us, and people with more resources gonna win every time. So we need to learn how to be satisfied with the things that we could do to keep them, ourselves. That's what happened with what they call Black Wall Street. People say we should never call it that, but that community in Oklahoma, where these Black people and natives built up, for themselves, became a beautiful community. But once the people around them had got jealous of what they did and the good job they did, they came and burned it down. But said I wanted to say, when you was talking about, you mentioned something about the Black Panther Party and how did the elders help them. The thing about it is the Black Panther Party didn't listen to the elders either, and that they were the best people in Pittsburgh right now to get that story on the Black Panther Party is two Black Panthers that is amongst us right now, and that's Khalid Rahim and brother Rashard Birdsong. Khalid will definitely give you the history and tell you, because he was one of them, how the young people didn't listen to the elders, and that was the downfall of the Black Panther movement. The downfall of it, yes. And I wanted to say this about the August Wilson Center. It wasn't just removing the name. When they were going to remove African American, if you were there when we were saving the building, you have to understand how important that was. When the deed for that site was being recorded, it was recorded like as an institution, an African. It didn't have the name August Wilson yet. It had African American Cultural Center. August Wilson's name is like, you see how they got the names on the stadiums and they could change, and you know what I mean, and all of that. That's what that is. But the institution is the African American Cultural Center, and that is what the money was raised for it to be. And that's where they took all that property with what you call it, when the government takes the property for the good of the public. What is it? Oh, I can't think of it now. But there's a process and there's a law that they're able to take the property.
Eminent domain.
Eminent domain. That's how that property came to be. And it was an institution, the African American Culture Center, which is the institution is protected. So once you take African American Culture Center, even though you leave August Wilson, the protection of the institution is no longer there. And therefore, you will lose the building and lose the space what it was for. And I don't think a lot of people know that, but that is why we fight, you know what I mean, so hard, because Pittsburgh for a long time had labored for an African American culture center. So we don't want to, raise money for something like that and then it end up going to big business and, you know what I mean, not doing what it's supposed to do. At least not on our watch. You see what I'm saying? It's not going to happen on our watch. So, that was the reasoning about that. And for me personally, being though, August Wilson is a part of our family history, for me to be living and watch a building like that with that family name being on it, being taken off, I mean, I would question myself, you know what I mean, for not saying something. What is that saying about, you know what I mean, just having the name entangled in that period? You wouldn't want that. So that, on the family side of that, that's how I felt about that.
Wow, thank you, Ms. Renee, for filling in that information. I didn't know like the difference between like August Wilson's name and it being a cultural center, like in the protection that comes along with that. Like that's super important. It's super important. And so that quiet changing is not a little thing. Like, like again, like that's just further erasure. It is further erasure. So thank you for sharing that. Someone had asked, and it's getting late and I need glasses, so forgive me if I jumble this. Tracy Walter said, my mother was telling me about historic markers that were outside of houses to let slaves know that the house was safe. Where were these houses located at, and are they still there? Does anyone know that? Bill?
Brings me back to this house that I want to find in Manchester. Believe it or not, they used to have these markers outside the house. It was like a black lawn jockey. It looked racist if you look at it. You're like, this is some racist ass crap. But it's actually a marker to let you know it's a safe house for the Underground Railroad. Now, one of these houses are in Manchester, and I swear I just spent the past 3 days walking all over Manchester trying to find it. Because I went past it and I showed my daughter, I said, see this house right here? I mean, it was just so easy when I went past it, but now I can't find it anymore. I'll give somebody a $25 get-go gift card if they could find this house in Manchester for me. Just take a picture of it. Just take a picture of it and send it to williamgandy408@gmail.com. So yeah, that's the markers outside. And one last thing, my Uncle Pee Wee, his name was Harvey in the pictures, but we called him Uncle Pee Wee. He was part of the first ambulance service that started out of Freedom House in the Hill, and Freedom House, they started, in fact, there was no ambulance service at all. Back in the day when you had to call somebody, the cops would show up, whether you're white or black or anything, and you could be hurt. They just throw you in the back of the car, pretty much. That's how they did you. So Freedom House started this ambulance service, and it started in the Hill. They started picking up people from the Hill and taking them in the Hill. And my Uncle Pee Wee, when you see your uncle back in the day, it's just like, oh, that's just Uncle Pee Wee. But when I saw him in those pictures that were taken, by, crap, his name is escaping me. Teenie Harris. When I saw those pictures that were taken by Teenie Harris and I saw my Uncle Pee Wee in there, I was like, darn, that's my Uncle Pee Wee. You know what I'm saying? He was one of the first 4 on that Freedom House ambulance service, which eventually became the EMT service throughout the world. You know what I'm saying? So it started right there on the Hill at Freedom House. It was the ambulance service. My Uncle Harvey Gandy, which we call Uncle Pee Wee, was part of that.
That's so cool. That is so cool. And that's been like, the fact that the ambulance service started right here in the Hill, that's been a conversation that's been coming up a lot lately. Me and Ms. Renee have been speaking about it. Bill, I know you and I have spoken about it. It's just been like reverberating in this time for some reason. Now, this is something I knew for, a number of years, but I found out on some complete humbug, right? Like it was some just random meeting that I was at. and the person speaking just happened to mention it. And so my understanding was like, I was late to the party and everyone else knew, but apparently no, like no one knows this. And that's super wild. Like, and so I think it was Miss Celeste, and now my time is getting conflated, but I think it was you, Miss Celeste, that mentioned appropriation, or maybe it was Miss Renee. But that's an instant in history where like something we created was appropriated by the city of Pittsburgh. You know, like in what I do know about it was, you know, like we started the EMT service right there on the Hill through Freedom House, was contracted with, I believe, Allegheny County, or was the city of Pittsburgh, one of the two. And the mayor at the time, Mayor Flaherty, didn't respect it at all, like was not here for it, didn't care what the Negroes was doing up in the Hill, whatever. And then there was a circumstance that happened in one of the white neighborhoods, like, let's say Castle Shannon or something, and I'm speaking, you know, just putting out a name. Something happened, I believe, with a kid. A kid got hit by a car or something. And, you know, they called Freedom House to show up, and they did, and they saved the kid's life. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, this is great. This is amazing what y'all are doing. And all of a sudden, Mayor Flaherty was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And you would think in that moment, the city of Pittsburgh would be like, this is great. We should pour more resources into it. We should support it. We understand why it's necessary. That's not what happened. What they did was they replicated what these folks created at Freedom House. And then they canceled the contract with Freedom House and said that y'all can come work for us, but you have to be retrained by us, even though y'all taught us how to do what y'all are doing. And now it's the thing that's used globally, right? Like Bill said, like it's something that we all use and are familiar with and have no idea that started right here on the Hill District by the Black folks in the Hill District who were not being, not receiving services, or, services as far as being picked up and taken to the hospital. And that seems very true to today too, right? Like when we call paramedics, it's often that, they don't always show up in Black neighborhoods as quickly as they would in white neighborhoods, white and non-Black neighborhoods. So that's, yeah, it hurts. It's also uplifting knowing like what our stock is made of, right? Like we did that, like we do this all of the time. We constantly and consistently do that, right? And do this, and we have no idea that we've done it over and over and over again, right? We create systems, we create communities, we create product, we create all of these things, and they're constantly either leveled out completely, or they're taken from us, like, the EMT services. And then all of a sudden we just, like, oh, well, we're told that we're nothing, that we're subpar, that we're incapable. And that is not true. It's systemic. It is absolutely systemic. So I'm going to take a step back. Do y'all have any thoughts before I continue talking?
I wanted to lift up John Brewer and his wife, Tina Brewer. And there's so many people in Homewood that are just so important and instrumental in terms of keepers of history, and so important. John passed away a few years ago, but he was one of the people that helped establish the Westinghouse Wall of Fame, and he also had the trolley at the Coliseum. And I'm sad that we weren't able to purchase their building, and UPMC took it over, but I'm glad that they were able to get a good price for the building, because they put a lot into it, and it's very valuable. I'd like us to be a little more forward thinking and saving some of our other institutions. I'm glad that we're figuring out a way to save the Black Opera House, which is amazing. But I'm sure you can, think of many other places that have closed over the years. The Leamington Home for the Aged, the, Lavelle Financial Institution on the Hill, and many others. So when we talk about the importance of history, I'm hoping that we can add how we can, save our institutions and create some new ones that, will focus on the well-being of our people.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Miss Celeste. And absolutely, we should definitely, and again, we need to preserve our history and record and share our history. So yeah, the Black Opera House in Homewood recently received some funding. So, big ups to, I think it was Janae Solomon, who's been heading that up, and a group of other folks as well. So definitely shout out to them. But that's not the only place. And Ms. Celeste just named several places that hold our history. And so whatever we can do to hold them and keep them in our helm, we should definitely do that. All right. So I've held y'all for about an hour and a half, and I will keep you all night if y'all are here for it. So I want to ask, is there anything else y'all want to share with our folks tonight? Bill?
At Facebook, Allegheny City Historic Gallery. And if you look at my Allegheny Historic Gallery Pittsburgh page, oh my God, you'll be blown away by some old Homewood photos that I found of professional Black people. I swear to God, you have to go look at it. The ACHG Pittsburgh, Allegheny City Historic Gallery Pittsburgh site, okay? And you will be blown away. If you are a lover of Homewood, you'll love those pictures.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Ms. Renee, were you going to say something as well?
Yes, I want people to know that everybody should know this now because this is current history. They are restoring the birth house of where August Wilson was born at. They're going to actually put it back the way it was, at least the living room, I believe, the way it was. Paul Ellis, his nephew, is in charge of that project. And I talked to my cousin, Linda Jean, who is his oldest sister that's living now. And she is excited about that just putting it back to, where it was, and that she's living to be able to see that is very, very powerful to her. Hopefully we'll keep that one.
I also wanted to lift up Freedom Corner. And Renee and I didn't talk much about the work we have been doing for decades to stop police brutality and to make sure that we honor those whose lives have been stolen. And many of the marches and events began there. And then up and, until now, there's been other major things that have happened. And with the murder trial of Chauvin, and I guess there'll be closing arguments and deliberating on Monday, and knowing that the trauma that we experience through seeing and hearing and living through all of these very tragic things that I think sometimes young people in particular are so traumatized that they have to figure out creative ways of dealing with the trauma. And I know some people haven't wanted to watch certain movies, certain shows, like I don't want to watch them. But I'm careful not to take away from other people's way of dealing with trauma. This isn't to say I don't have any judgments or guidelines, but it's so deep and it's so hurtful. And I don't want to call it trauma porn. It's trauma, period. And we have got to be able to support one another as we go through this in our families and in our communities. And I just want us to not lose sight of the humanity of all this, the justice that's needed and it's required.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Celeste, for speaking on that. We definitely didn't speak too much on the history of police violence and the work that you all have been doing to push back and fight and hold space for our people. Yeah, it's definitely necessary. I feel like I talk about it a lot and it needs to be talked about a lot. So, oh well, because that will continue to happen. We've done several, and we continue. Actually, I want to like highlight and underscore what you said about like us consuming the police violence, the murders that we've literally watched people die repeatedly, right? Like repeatedly on the advent of video phones, right? We've been watching our folks be murdered in cold, callous blood, and then there be no justice served over and over and over again. I mean, I would say that is absolutely traumatizing in and of itself. The kids that I work with, like I tell them, don't watch it. Don't. You can learn about it. You can read about it. I recommend them not to watch it. Like you should not be consuming that level of trauma repeatedly, especially, right? Like, and I recommend all of us, like all of us Black folk, like we should not be consuming all of those videos. It should be seen and it should happen, right? Because we need that. We need to hold history and record what's happening, but we don't need to consume that. You know, we don't need to consume our people being murdered repeatedly. We do not need to consume that. When we started this podcast a couple of years ago, as my students through Learner Earn, my Homewood students, they led the charge on creating this podcast, and they did all of the research. I wanted them to search specifically for instances of police violence in Allegheny County. And I wanted them to do that and go through the process of doing that because it's really hard to find. It's really, really hard to find. Police departments locally will deny that it happens at all completely, which we know that that's not true. And trying to find information on it is, instances that have taken place. It's really, really difficult, like there are archives of news clippings or whatnot are not easy to access. And so they went through the process of finding, local instances of police violence. But in that, we had certain parameters. It was like, if there are videos, you are not to watch it. We're here to take down the stories. We're not here to consume them in that way because it is quite harmful. But also they got to see this is what's happening and this is what we're being told. And those two things don't match at all. They don't match at all. And there's no accountability unless we are able to track that as real. And currently our police system generally, and I mean across the country and globally, right, are not acknowledging that this is a real thing, that anti-Blackness is a real thing, that police terrorism is a real thing. And so I definitely celebrate and thank you all for continuing to fight and leading the charge and creating space for folks like myself to step into that space as well, alongside you all. So thank you. All right. So if that will, I think we had a good hour and a half here. So I'm gonna let y'all rest. But I definitely would like to continue to have these conversations. And as you all know, I have plenty in store and plenty on plan as far as focusing on history, particularly Black history, but Pittsburgh history overall. Fun fact, Pittsburgh doesn't have a history museum. Pittsburgh History Museum. And I'm not talking about that daggone Fort Pitt, whatever. No, something that is holding our current events, the things that have taken place, super cool things that we should just know about the city generally. But when it comes to Black Pittsburgh history, particularly, we need to know that. So we definitely have more things to come. If you are interested in being a part of that, I definitely encourage you to reach out to the Narrative Justice. You can hit us up at the racial justice and media @gmail.com is our email, or you can call at 412-453-6309 if you would like to get involved with some of the things we are doing around Pittsburgh history. But we also have plenty of other projects and different ways you can get involved. So definitely reach out, let me know. I am currently looking for an assistant particularly for a project. I said particularly a lot, but anyway, specifically for a project that I'm working on, and I need an assistant. It pays $15 an hour, part-time. Would love to have anybody reach out, please. Folks who have a history with or experience in research or journalism would be preferred. That would be a good up, but definitely not required. You definitely have to be someone who is detail oriented and who's not going to get on my nerves when I ask you to do something. that's a real ask, and that's a real thing that I need. So if you are interested, please definitely reach out, and we'll go from there. I'll talk more about like what the project is, and what my needs are for that. So if anyone is interested in, being my part-time assistant on a project, 15 hours part-time, reach out. Email is racialjusticeandmedia@gmail.com. Our phone number is 412-453-6309. I'd like to thank our guests for today, Bill Gandy, Celeste Taylor, and Renee Wilson. They are amazing, amazing people, powerhouses. I've known them all probably for the extent that I've been active in community, which is a little over 11 years now. They watched me grow up in a lot of different ways. Like I just kind of been out here jitterbugging and doing whatever, falling and fumbling, but definitely staying with the fight. As Bill mentioned, like you definitely don't know all of the things that I've gotten into, have gotten into, and continue to get into. And it's thanks to folks like them who have been supportive of me and all of those things, and I've been able to be supportive of, that has made it possible for me to get to this point. So I definitely appreciate them. If you do know them, reach out and ask them questions. Ask them to just share with you, like, the things that they've experienced, the things that they know, because they hold a lot of our history, a lot of important history. If you don't know them, definitely reach out. They're all on Facebook, super active, and just dope people, generally, like very, approachable. As a reminder, Bill did say if you come across the lawn jockey in Manchester, send him a pic of it at williamgandy408@gmail.com, and he will send you a gift card of $25 if you send him that picture. And I want to make sure that happens for Bill. So definitely do that if you can. And that'll be the end for today. Thank you all for sticking with us for as long as you have. If you have not seen the whole thing, I definitely recommend playing it back. Super important information, super interesting information that was shared here. And that's not even scraping the surface of what we have to offer here in Pittsburgh. So definitely keep, stay tuned, keep with us, and offer whatever you can. Thanks. That's it.